We said back in 2011 that we would be out in 2014. We stayed another 7 years, far and above and beyond the commitment that we made more than a decade ago.
That was National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on America's longest war. Joining us now to discuss, Pennsylvania Congressman Guy Reschenthaler standing by. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. We know you served in Iraq, and we thank you for your service. Talk to me, if you could, about your overall analysis of the Biden administration's handling of what's happening right now in Afghanistan.
Emma, it's been a complete debacle. But first off, thanks for having me on, and as always, just call me Guy. Going back to how Joe Biden has handled this, it's been an absolute mess. Any novice could tell you, any junior officer in the military could tell you, you don't give up the Bagram Air Base until you're fully evacuated. And what we saw on that tarmac is the U.S. military, because of the decisions Joe Biden and top military brass made, unable to have an orderly evacuation. Again, it was a civilian air base or a civilian air station instead of a military air base in Bagram. Complete debacle. But moving back just from the evacuation, it's also horrible policy to do a complete withdrawal from Afghanistan. And here's why. In the last 18 months, we've had 0 U.S. fatalities in Afghanistan. We could have stayed there, not been engaged in kinetic operations ourselves, but merely we could have been providing our partners in Afghanistan with intelligence. And we've got to be there on the ground to provide human intelligence. We also should have been providing them with cover from the air, with air cover, and we should have been working with them to make sure that their planes were fully operated, to make sure that they were still training properly. In short, it's an epic blunder to pull out of Afghanistan, and it's a tragedy the way that Joe Biden and top military brass executed this retreat.
We have seen chaotic scenes at the Kabul airport where Afghans are desperately trying to board these carriers to exit the country. At this point, there are American citizens who are still in Afghanistan trying to make their way to the airport. We don't know an exact number, quite frankly. That number has shifted. Perhaps there are 10,000 American citizens in Afghanistan still trying to get out. When asked by reporters about allies and also the Afghan people who are trying to leave, here's what Jake Sullivan had to say. Listen to this, and then I'll get your reaction.
We gave 20 years of American blood, treasure, sweat, and tears in Afghanistan. We gave them every capacity in terms of training and equipment to stand up and fight for themselves. And at some point, it was the time for the United States to say that the Afghan people had to stand up for themselves.
Congressman, what kind of message is this saying to our allies around the world? And then if you could comment, too, on the fact that we're still working to get American citizens out of Afghanistan.
Well, it sends a horrible message, Emma, to our allies. How would you like to be sitting in Taiwan right now and seeing this disaster? How would you like to be in South Korea facing the North Korean military just to your north and see what's happening now in Afghanistan? It's a complete mistake. And I should say this. It is a form of international victim shaming that you would turn around and blame our partners in Afghanistan. The Afghan military has suffered roughly 50,000 casualties in the last few years. This is a force that, yes, they needed our support, but they were willing to fight. They were putting up a fight, but they needed our support. They needed our intelligence. They needed our help with for example, aircraft maintenance. Just like the South Koreans probably couldn't fight North Korea on their own. That doesn't mean we should pull out of South Korea. And as far as giving up Bagram Air Base, that absolutely makes no sense. We've got 28,000 troops still in South Korea. That war happened in the late 40s, early 50s. We still have troops in Germany. We still have troops in Japan. We still have a military base in Cuba. This is absolutely absurd that we would give up our ability to project power abroad. And this pivot to Asia that everybody talks about, yes, we need to pivot to Asia, but look at a map, get a globe. Western China actually borders part of Eastern Afghanistan. We're in the neighborhood right there. By us pulling out, we're letting the Chinese Communist Party move in, exploit that region. We're giving the Russians more ability to operate in that region. And as far as internationally, it's not only sending a message to our allies that we don't have the resolve to defend them. It's also emboldening terrorists and our adversaries. 9/11 used to be a day of somber remembrance of the attacks that happened on 9/11. Now moving forward, thanks to Joe Biden, thanks to top military brass, thanks to unelected career bureaucrats like Jake Sullivan, 9/11 will now be a day that the Taliban and terrorists all over regions that hate the United States and hate the West will celebrate 9/11 as a victory over what they perceive as the great Satan, the United States. It's despicable that Joe Biden let this happen. And as far as the withdrawal itself, we should have always retained Bagram Air Base. We should have done this withdraw if we were truly going to do it, which I don't agree with. But if you were going to do it, we should have done the withdraw, told our allies on the ground to come to Bagram Air Force Base. We should have maintained that base until we got everybody out. The fact that you gave up the base where you can have stability and you can retaliate from that base, again, any junior military officer could tell you that was a blunder. And you have General Milley, you have Austin, you have Jake Sullivan making these decisions. All three of them should resign. I've already said Joe Biden should resign over this as well. This is an absolute failure. America looks weak. And Joe Biden, because of this decision, has put us in a bad place moving forward for decades in terms of geopolitics, not about Afghanistan.
Yeah. Again, the president set to address the nation this afternoon on COVID. Perhaps a reporter could ask a question about that airbase specifically. Really fascinating conversation. Congressman Guy Reschenthaler, Pennsylvania. Thanks so much. Always great to hear from you. Take care.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you.